Gary, please tell me what was the opening that you saw in the market back when you were just starting the company?
Yeah, and my journey was definitely, I think, different than many entrepreneurs in many ways. I started in the corporate world. I started on Wall Street, 1994, building trading systems and working my way up the corporate ladder. I love to think I was an entrepreneur within large Fortune 50 companies and creating platforms, creating businesses inside of large, massive 400,000 employee companies. So the journey to Unqork was really, I would call it a leap out of the corporate world, out of that safety net of salaries and bonuses that you get used to. And I was there for almost 25 years. So it's been a long journey, but it was something I saw as an absolute necessity that was needed in the market. It was something that personally, as a chief information officer, I saw was lacking and wasn't experienced there, which was software creation. What I had seen was we were achieving great scale at infrastructure and security and analytics. And you could look at all those companies and you could see all the cloud computing companies and analytics companies and data companies. You could see them thriving to achieve scale in technology, when in reality, the scale was never achieved in building software applications. We're still creating software the way it's been done for 30 years, no matter what improvements have happened around it. And I literally, Pep, I remember stepping back one day and saying, I've got 10,000 engineers working for me. That's a lot in 47 countries, like 500 engineers in Japan alone that were working for me. And then you step back and look at what we're achieving for the company, for the shareholders, for customers. And the reality was 80% of their effort and spend is just keeping the lights on. That's it. It's just keeping things running. It's just, and we refer to that as legacy. And it's responding to another term which many people will know called end of life, meaning a technology is about to go end of life and it's a mad rush to rectify it, to fix it. And all of that spend, 80%, is just in those buckets of making sure things continue to run as is. And then we all talk about that 20%, the innovation, the spend where you're going to change the world and drive this. And I used to present to the board of directors. I used to go in and say, here's how we're doing in these amazing programs of consolidation and this. And the real epiphany was waking up and saying, God, every time we turn on something new, it's immediately going over to that next bucket. And it's immediately legacy. The second we create it, it's old. The second we create it, you have to explain it to someone. You have to keep it alive on life support. You have to worry about end of life software and browser changes and hardware changes and software changes. And suddenly that application, which was shining and new, in a minute after it goes live is old and can't respond. And that was where I didn't see an end to this happening. I saw it as an infinite cycle. And I looked at the large cap companies, the large tech companies, and Pep, as a CIO, you get flown to go meet with the CEOs of every major company. You meet the CEOs and the founders. You meet startups. You could go and really get pitched by anyone the future. No one got it. There wasn't a single company that stepped back and agreed with this vision of, because everyone's making money. Everyone's like, well, we're great. We're making hardware. We're making software. We're charging services. We're a strategic integrator. We're making service dollars here. The big four firms, like everyone's doing well except the enterprise. And the misery of that enterprise and what I was dealing with, I felt like an attorney, basically defending why things were late and over budget and why were requirements not delivered on time and the process of software. And the reality was I just wanted to get to solving problems. I wanted to help my business fix their solutions. And that's when we created Unqork. And it was, we opened payroll, believe it or not, in 2017, November 2017. So not too long ago.
Today, there are quite a bit of no-code platforms out there. What was the competitive landscape in 2017?
Yeah, there was no one out there. So in the enterprise space, there's still no one that competes with enterprise no code. And we've really ushered in what we call codeless architecture, which is, it's not about a single tool to solve world hunger and all your problems. It's about a strategy and architecture, which evolves from serverless architecture. It's the evolution of cloud. It's the next steps. And that's what we've been driving. We were the first, we pioneered it. We are still the only. And I think that's, it is At this point, you could see where the research groups have combined low code with no code and application platforms and where we sit. So in reality, every time we enter a client, they're competing us against the incumbents who are 20-year-old technology companies. And Microsoft and Salesforce are the two biggest competitors we see as the incumbent. They're never there when it's new. And so when we're competing with giants like that who have been around for 20 years, the difference with us is our fundamental principle of no code and codeless architecture separates us from the pack. There is no one that competes. But it was about us defining the space because there was no one there. And I think as we defined the space and our fundraising went up and our employees, over 600 employees increased, and the voice of the market and marketing, of course, everyone else came along with it. And now you've got 100 companies that are 20 years old, all claiming to be no code, all claiming that their no code is the future and we're no code. And I could tell you, if you ever try those companies, as I had as a CIO, and I tried everyone you could imagine, spending $1 billion a year on technology. That was my budget. $1 billion every single year on technology. They don't work. It's simple thing. They actually don't do what they say.
And so you had tried all these other no-code platforms before starting Unqorked.
I did. I've tried the largest CRM platforms and done those largest deals. The way I would describe this, for those who aren't familiar with software development, is when you think about you want something to solve your problem. In the earliest days, you would have to hire an engineer and a developer, and these engineers would code in an ancient Greek-like language to basically create your unique IP, your customer IP. And you've created businesses. You know exactly what I'm talking about, which is, here's my spec, go build it. And I'm still an engineer by background. I still call myself an engineer first and foremost. And so you have this idea of solving a problem and communicating to a hardware and tell it what to do. And that's the old days. When packaged software came out in the early days, from ERP software to CRM software to HR software, they all promised, we've got your IP here. Just define your IP and it works. The reality was you locked your IP away in someone else's container and it never worked. The reason why it never worked was they never solved for all the use cases. They never actually solved for the most complex use cases. They solved for the simplest. And then eventually every company gave up and said, hey, we've got the simple use case. If you want to do something more, code. Here's a language to code in. And companies like Salesforce invented their own coding languages. And many other companies have. Excel. If you've used Excel before, which most people have used Microsoft Excel, VBA was basically the excuse to say, oh, if we can't achieve it in a spreadsheet, code it in Visual Basic language. And that's been around forever. And when you think about that, and that's the evolution of low code, packaged software becomes low code, what it's missing out is the fact that everyone's repeating the same thing over and over and over again in that code. So people who use Excel know there's a future value calculation or standard deviation calculation. You wouldn't think of recreating that. But that's what's happening in software today. Every single person is recreating those formulas from scratch in every division of every company, of every industry. And that's what the software has enabled for 20 years. Our view is very different. The view is we have an engineering team that's the best in the world, and they're creating an abstraction of that function. We're abstracting that standard deviation, an example, or future value calculation. And we're abstracting a function that lets you scan a driver's license, take a picture of your phone, and all the information comes in. That's great. Or credit checks. Like, that's all components to us at a base level. We code that, and you never know what's happening behind the scenes. But what you know is that it's going to work 100% of the time. It's not going to have any bugs. It's going to be the most secure system you've seen because everyone's testing it. And they're all testing the same version of it instead of coding it from scratch. So that's the biggest difference of this world we live in, which is, that's great. Maybe low code makes you slightly faster, but it generates legacy faster. The second you allow someone to code your legacy, that system, it's gone. It's basically, you're going to worry about this. If there's a vulnerability that comes out, like we all experienced, a Log4j security vulnerability, like we were very quick to be able to say, not impacted. That's great. If you allowed someone to code, you would never know if that's the case. And that's a big difference.
So you had deep enterprise experience. You knew how they buy software. You knew the problems. You could probably sell them on their pain points, and you also knew how other players in the market where they had fallen short. Like their solutions were inadequate. So you had a clear vision for what it needs to be in order for it to work.
We absolutely did. And what I would also say is knowing where we came from, which is Fortune 50 companies where there's 50,000 engineers in a company. And we used to claim we have more engineers than Microsoft did. What we also knew was we can't start off solving simple problems in small businesses. So if you walked into a major top four bank and said, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to solve your major onboarding issues that are the biggest issues of your company or your regulation issues, you'd get laughed out if the technology couldn't support the scale, security, vulnerability assessments, everything they need and worry about from a regulation point of view, the compliance. And so what we did different was we said, we're going to start with tier one customers, the Fortune 100 customers, the ones that are the toughest on any company, no matter what size. The ones that give you a 1,500 questionnaire when you're coming in to meet with them about compliance. And we're going to start with tier one customers with tier one use cases. So applications are classified into tier one, tier two, tier three. Maybe a tier three app is a spreadsheet, an online spreadsheet. Simple, easy. Tier one apps are critical to the business. That's the ones that are the complex apps that historically no software could solve except code. And there's $500 billion spent in tier one apps, in just coding, that's every single year in enterprises, 500 billion spent, which is our town that we're going after. And so we said we're going to start with tier one customers in tier one apps, and that's our first use case. And not with many investors early on said, hey, you should only have one customer when you start. Focus on that one customer, be in stealth mode, don't do anything, don't present anywhere, just focus on one customer. But living 20 plus years in enterprises, what we know is they're going to change priorities. That customer is going to have a management change or a shift or a budget change. And suddenly what we've been working on, which our livelihood and our future is in the hands of a single customer whose priorities might change. And teams. So we said we had to focus on 5 customers across 5 different business units, 5 different at the same time. So 5 tier 1 customers, 5 different tier 1 problems to solve. And the goal was, if we solve those problems, which of course we did, we're here and all 5 are still customers today. If we solve those problems, all the other problems are easy. So instead of working our way upwards in complexity and scaling, we said, let's start with the most complex and everything else is easy after that. So we could solve, and it proved so true that when we started working with Goldman Sachs in 2018, there was very little changes to the platform we needed to make to support one of the biggest investment banks. With all the security you need and all the checks you need, their help was more along the features and functions. So the idea with us is, at this point, you've got a platform that when you start creating software, you forget about compliance, security, and scalability. It's an application cloud that's given to you as a gift. It's like, we've already got this under control. We're supporting it. We got it. So that's unique. But starting with tier 1, I would recommend everyone to, go big, go for the largest complex use cases, the largest customers, because you'll be taken seriously by the rest of the market, and everything else is easy. And that's what's been proving to become true.
You're an industry insider, yet when you started to fundraise for the company, it didn't go so well.
I could have sworn that coming out of Fortune 50 companies, I was in the C-suite, flying corporate jets, meeting with CEOs from Microsoft and other major companies regularly. Like, this was part. I had a CIO peers of all the Fortune 50 companies we meet with, and I could have sworn the venture world would have welcomed someone who actually lived the pain and suffering and knew it best, but it was the exact opposite. So when we were pitching this vision of what we're going to be doing, we started to receive no after no after no from the top Midas investors. I mean, we kept the list of everyone we met with, and the advantage I did have, and we were able to get to any investor and do a pitch. We were taken seriously. We had a network, we had credibility, and that was something that we built up. But the feedback we were getting from investors, we would always ask for constructive criticism. And I always I welcome it. To me, to be a leader, you have to listen. It doesn't mean you agree or follow. You still have your own beliefs and directions, and you move your own directions, and that's where the team moves. But you need to listen to what's happening. That's part of the world we live in. And so I would listen, and we'd ask for feedback. And some of the feedback we got from top investors were, "You're too old. And I was 44." So feedback was, if you should have had three startups by now. There's no way you could create a startup. Other feedback was, if you lasted 1 year in corporate, there's no way you could be CEO of a startup. You've been institutionalized. And I think they kept picturing Shawshank Redemption with Morgan Freeman carving his initials. And so institutionalized, interesting. And so, the feedback was, platform sales are hard. It'll take 2 years to make a platform sell, your first sale. Our average deal cycle with the largest customers is less than 6 months. It's about 5 months today, and each of the deals historically. So it's not. So what we did different was, after meeting all these investors, instead of giving up, I met with a few of my top employees, my founding team members who are still here. My CTO, Bassam, who's incredible, and he left McKinsey as partner to join us. And I remember one top investor in front of me that looked at him and go, "Wait, you're leaving McKinsey for this? Like, this is wait, what are you doing?" And so I self-funded the company. I came back and I said, "We're going to go at it our own. Let's focus on the customer. Let's focus on getting revenue." And we had revenue within 6 months of creating the company from one of our top clients, Liberty Mutual, Fortune 100 company, amazing leadership with James Milcott in there and team. And just, we were in production within 6 months. And it was revenue. We had revenue from Principal Financial Group. And it was the CEO of the whole division there backed us up and said, "We believe in this." And so we had 5 of the major insurance companies as customers within 6 to 8 months. And when it came time to actually fundraise, we defined the terms. We defined where we're going and who we wanted. But most importantly, we took every quote from those investors, the quotes that were just, the most negative constructive quotes, and we plastered them on a wall, a 20 by 20 wall in our office that has come into 2 offices at least that we've had. And we called it the quote wall. And took everything negative that was said and made it an inspirational quote for us to prove wrong and drive forward. And we loved it. And that's been the journey since. And, we have the best investors I can imagine. Goldman led our Series A, Capital G, Alphabet led our Series B, and BlackRock led our Series C when we hit the 2 billion valuation over 5 quarters ago now. So it's been about 5 quarters since that. And
Where were you at with revenue when you finally fundraised? And those first set of customers, did you get them through cold outbound sales, or these were like people you knew?
Yeah, I would definitely say in the beginning, we had credibility. And I'd say half the customers were what you'd call relationship customers that knew me and knew my team. My team is the best team of experts. My team is, like, industry expertise is so deep that I sit back in awe in many meetings and just listen and learn and watch, and just every aspect of regulation and needs and where we're going and definition. And that's what helped create the product, the maturity it is. But when we think about those early customers, I think the first year we might have had maybe 100K of revenue or 200K, but then we projected 6 million when we did our seed round. That's a real first full year in business. First full year in business, we projected 6 million and we hit it. And that was then we did the Series A and we projected to be triple. We hit it. We projected another double, triple. We hit it. And we've been double, since that point, which has been a great place to be. We were early on. We were probably one of the few startups that could talk GAAP earnings. Coming from corporate, like, we kind of understand GAAP and audits and how it works. So I loved it. One of our seed investors used to call us the best run company he's seen. And I think that comes from, we came from the corporate world. So we didn't come from the startup world of Silicon Valley and the West Coast. We came out of the corporate world. We were an insider in Fortune 50 companies, presenting to boards and analysts and investors. And that's been our journey.
Once you ran out of the first set of, let's say, relationship leads, and you had to, venture out to, start selling to people you don't know, how were you acquiring those customers? Was it through outbound sales? Was it marketing? What was happening?
Oh, we definitely have. My chief marketing officer, Alex Schmelkin, Chief Revenue Officer now, Philippe Lecor, incredible. Alex, I had worked with since 2006. And the story is, I was at Citigroup and I was asked to build their largest e-commerce engine at the time. And Pep, I don't know if you remember 2006. If you think about e-commerce as a term, the best example in 2006 of true e-commerce was 1-800-Flowers. That was like the best experience anyone could think of. It was not Amazon. It was not where we are today in a marketplace and shopping. And so I researched who built 1-800-Flowers, and I hired this small team called Alexander Interactive, which was a digital agency and design shop in New York City. Alex was his company, and we created in about a year the biggest e-commerce engine, still running there, in Wall Street. And and we've been working together ever since. He came over in our founding team as our chief marketing officer. We are, from inbound perspective, outbound perspective, we definitely are owning the space. What I really am proud of, though, is those customers we've had, they see us deliver. They see for the first time it works. It's actually, they're telling everyone else it's 3 times faster and 3 times cheaper than anything they've ever seen in their life before us, anywhere. And it works, and it's in production, and they're seeing it. And those individuals who took those risks on us are getting promoted. They're moving up. They're moving to different companies. So we see our customers moving around, and many times we are in their new company before they are. We're signed up, and they make sure we're ready to go because they know they need us. They understand the value that we bring. And so I love when we celebrate success with customers and seeing their faces and feedback. And to me, that's critical. Deliver.
You mentioned that you're still the only one in this space. So what's the moat here? Why is it so hard for other competing players to enter the market?
There's amazing no-code companies. I'm going to be very like Airtable is a no-code company, and it's designed for citizen developers to create software. They started to experience now to say, if you want to do more complex, here's a scripting language, go code. There's other no-code software that's amazing for doing consumer apps. That's great. Or maybe there's software for building designs like Figma, which is an amazing design tool. It's no code. It's the difference with all of these is just the level of complexity they could handle before you need to code. They're simple apps. They targeted the tier 3 apps. And that's great. It's amazing business. It's great what they've done. When you think about, you're not going to use that software to create a trading platform. And yet, for one of the largest custodian banks in the world, we're running, post-reg recon trade. We're doing trade reconciliation. We're doing real-time trade matching. That's all functionality achieved in Unqork. In insurance, we're doing rate quote bind. You'll never know it's us, but we're using it. In healthcare, you're walking into a hospital, Maimonides Medical Center, it's with a patient registration system. If you go online for their app, which is an amazing application, you could make an appointment with a doctor and use AI to find the doctor based on condition. You could pay your bill and see your research and see your results, and it's all through Unqork, 100%. And then what's amazing is a brand new life science company with stage 4 cancer. Public sector, we are in places like Chicago where the mayor called us out on ABC TV and said Unqork helped us provide relief funds. We've helped deliver 100 million food orders during COVID for places like New York City, which is amazing, and it's just incredible. And when you think about the journey, that's just a start. Now we have federal. As of yesterday, we're on the FedRAMP marketplace. So federal agencies are sponsoring us to be a FedRAMP certified platform for their use. And I guess I look at that world of growth and where we're going, and it's about understanding compliance. HIPAA compliance, SOC 2, Type 2, Privacy Shield, GDPR compliance, FedRAMP certification, Privacy 2020, worm compliance. You want to make sure you understand data lineage and compliance needs of versioning and document storage. All of that requires in-depth industry expertise. None of those platforms have. Those platforms all started off as horizontals. They all started off with, let's get a simple product that scales massively, which is awesome. And many of these technology companies now are starting to build industry verticals and say, let's go after insurance and go after banking and capital markets. And we've already done all that. To us, that was our start. So what we're saying is the horizontal to us now is just a open the funnel and sales and marketing. It's just a go-to-market play now. It's not a product play. The product market fit is there. The product is capable. It's simply now just targeting those tier two and tier three apps and tier two and tier three customers and driving that downhill. And that's the scale play we're currently executing.
Tell me more. How are you competing on brand and marketing today?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we are defining the new space. Many of the research groups have said, we get it, you're a category of one, but you can't have a category of one. So many teams group us into the bigger categories of low code, no code, which we don't believe in. We don't believe the category should exist. And so what we're doing right now is, and you'll see a lot of messaging, is we've defined what really this is about. Is not about selecting a single tool to solve your needs. It's about an architecture. It's about a technical team embracing and defining an architecture for their company, which is called codeless architecture. And in a codeless architecture world, the best of breed technologies are brought together, not a single technology. And Pat, the best example. So in corporate world, you would not believe how much paper still exists. And I love this story. We were meeting with a C-suite of a big Fortune, 250 financial firm, and when we meet with them, we typically ask one question, which is, "What's your biggest problem today? What isn't working? What's?" And before we got to that question, the chief architect raised his hand and said, "Hey, do you use blockchain?" And we said, no, today we're being trusted to store the most secure data in a way where it's single tenant. We give the customer the key. We don't hold the key, so they'll store all their PI data, privacy data in Unqork. And it's extremely secure because of the way we designed it. So we could potentially plug into blockchain, and we're working with many cryptocurrency companies today. Many of the top companies use us, but we haven't needed for storage. And I'm excited now. And I'm like, this is going to be a great conversation. They're so advanced. They're talking blockchain, and we ask the question and say, tell us what's your biggest problem we could help with. And the CEO says, can you get rid of the fax machines? And the disconnect between the two was blockchain, fax machines, and so many of the companies today are running on paper. And they're still running on paper and faxes and paper. And as a consumer, I don't know if you filled out a claims form for your healthcare provider. It's paper documents still today. Like I just look at my vaccine card. It's like a
Yeah.
library card from the 1980s. And so like it's paper. And so many companies say OCR is a strategy. OCR is not a strategy. And to us, there should never be a single technology that promises to do all the OCR needs you need. All OCR is ingesting paper and digitizing it. We view the world as there's many amazing OCR companies out there. There's one that does structured data, one that does tax documents, one that does unstructured, one that does pictures and vision, one that does driver's license, amazing, one that does passports. So in our codeless architecture story, you just simply click which one and drag it in, which one you want. Many of the other companies out there, the largest tech companies, are saying, we built OCR into our software. And we say, you shouldn't have. That's a mistake. And any company picking them should welcome the fact that I could pick the best of breed and snap it together and compose it in a way that hasn't been done before.
Sooner or later, a competitor will, enter your space. Maybe it will take a few years. Are you consciously building any type of moats, or are you just happy being like the top dog, and probably that market position is gonna carry you for a long time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so we step back and look at what's unique about us is that engine we built to run those complex tier one apps and regulated apps, no one could compete with today. And we understand that there's many trying, but that's the area we're unique. You could think of it as we built an operating system for applications. It's almost equivalent of on your iPhone, the iOS, the App Store. That's what we built. So what we're doing different, though, Pep, is what we realize in codeless architecture. There's going to be many different tools to create that application that runs in that operating system. So today, we built a design tool that's amazing to drag and drop and create software with no code. Just drag and drop, create all the functionality you need. In 5 minutes, I could sit with you as a client and myself, and I could basically create anything you could dream of. And when we're done, it's not a wireframe or prototype, it's production ready. It's secured, it's compliant, it's scalable, it's ready to go. But the engine is our moat. And the thing about that engine is what we're listening, we're listening to the client's needs and feedback and what they want and see and the requirements and the drive. And that engine isn't stale. It's not a 20-year-old technology like a CRM tool that's deploying today and saying that's what it does. It's continuously being enhanced. And what's unique about us is this: the second we said you can't put code in our engine, and that's for those who know hardware. Could you imagine going into your garage, and I'm sure you've got some old, hardware in your garage, old PCs sitting somewhere like all of us do, an old Dell hardware compact or something else sitting there. Could you imagine shipping that to Amazon and saying, could you rack this in AWS for me to use? That's the code. That's what's actually happening right now as we speak with every other company, which is they're telling their customers, put your code, which is that old hardware, in our container and we'll run it for you. And the reality is insecure, can't be patched, can't be scaled, no visibility, no transparency. You don't know what it's doing. And it can't be supported. And it's legacy the second it's there. So you never would do it. And yet that's what's happening today. So in our world, that engine, which will never allow code inside, means every customer of ours is on the same version guaranteed, no matter what industry they're in, no matter which cloud provider they're running. And it doesn't matter to us, we're cloud agnostic. But by keeping everyone on the same version, it basically means they're supporting each other without knowing it with cyber checks, vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, functional testing, user testing, experience testing. All of that is being done by every company on the same version of software. So if someone pen tests Unqork tomorrow and someone else pen tests it the next day, they're pen testing the same software. That doesn't happen in any technology you've seen. So our mode is the engine. We welcome others to create the design tool. We welcome, maybe it's Figma, maybe Figma should be generating design. We have 2 clients which are using their own design tool already today to publish it to our engine, our app engine. So to us, that design aspect, while we provide it, and it's great what we provide, there's no question, we would welcome others. And we recently took 2 of our major competitors and we were able to reverse their definition into our definition and host it in our codeless architecture engine. And it's ubiquitous in that case, which is an amazing, no more legacy, end of legacy, end of life. That's what it's an amazing message to push.
You mentioned that one of your pieces of advice for a startup founder or a B2B SaaS startup would be to tackle a very hard problem first. What other, let's say, advice and wisdom would you pass on to a fellow founder?
So, working in the corporate world, Pep, and I'll be careful how I say this, but you can imagine climbing Wall Street, and I was one of the youngest managing directors in the operations and technology group at a Fortune 50 company. And I did it with eyes wide open, meaning I understood all the bureaucracy, all the forces against me, all the forces against change in the company. And understanding that is critical, and understanding what your goals are and how to get there. But when you think about that journey, it also teaches you to trust yourself and understand where is everyone else's intentions lie. So there was an amazing investor early on who gave some advice and said, be stealth mode. Don't come out and unveil the platform after a year or 2 when it's in production. Say, hey, look what we've done. And I disagreed. And within a month, I was in Satya Nadella's, Microsoft's biggest Envision conference, on stage presenting. And they asked me to, and why would I say no? And this was back in 2017. It's been a long time. So I think it's about trusting yourself. Most importantly, I would give advice. Out of all the corporate world training I've gone through, the Harvard Business School, week education there, which they put you through, MIT, every aspect of bringing and meeting, and the one when you're in the corporate world, they invest in you, which is a great thing. I appreciate it. I thank every company I work for and every leader I work for. What I would say is that investment has taught me one thing, which is we all have a hidden bias to hire people like ourselves. And when you interview someone, if it feels natural and comfortable, it's most likely because they think and look and talk like you do. And that's why it's comfortable. And so I want to be uncomfortable. You learn when you're uncomfortable. I want a team that challenges me. So my senior team that's been working with me, my founding team, there's not a single individual on that team who's anything like me. The diversity of our team in thought and diversity in leadership, and that same message of hiring others that are different than you has carried through every level of our organization. And I'm so proud of that. I think we were one of the top 3 diverse startups in LinkedIn. about a year ago, and just what the team drives and the message and the belief and the culture is amazing to see. So I would definitely recommend bring people to your table who you trust, who think differently than you do, and you want that message. You don't want everyone, swimming the same way you are.
And my final question, what are you betting on to achieve your next milestone?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So definitely this year we have some new features and functions coming, some amazing stuff, and bring your own component and functionality with FedRAMP certification, so everyone becomes. But but the aspect of what we enable, which is truly amazing, is number one, tackle the legacy problem. Almost all of the spend holding back companies today is in legacy. What we're starting to see is this ability to extract that functionality from your legacy and port it to Unqork systematically. Bring it over to our cloud application engine, our moat, and let us host it and run it for you securely. There should be no one migrating things to the cloud. Migration to the cloud is taking what's old and moving it to something new. There's no advantage to it. You get no data, no security, nothing new from it. Migrate it to our environment as a future. And in that future, I see this world where there's 24 million engineers who use Unqork. Like, that's great. They all use Unqork to do pieces. But 90% of what those 24 million engineers could do is creating algorithms that we haven't dreamed of yet, creating things that none of us have even imagined yet, instead of what they're doing today, which is moving a freaking button around the screen. That's what they're doing. Or responding to an outage of a vSAM file running on OS 390 in the mainframe and upgrading the version and testing the version. I just look at the talent out there in technology and what it can do. And I look at what I personally saw it doing under my leadership and other leaderships. And I think that unlocking that potential, which is what we're about, is the best thing we can ever do for anyone and the world. It's going to be an amazing place when you think through that.
Awesome.